Aloha kako. Just trying to get our other two panelists joined in as panelists. I think they're currently viewers, but he said that there's 51 of you in here, so mahalo for your patience. All of our panelists here. And let's get started. First of all, aloha mai kako, ʻoau iho no o Kamale Maradi, no Waipio, he mea malama planela, he mea kakao, he limahana noho i ma native books. So aloha, my name is Kamale Maradi. I'm with Native Books, but I'm like a writer for them as well as a panel moderator. And I'm super happy to be able to introduce these four wahine. First up is Ānuenue DeSoto, 18-year-old fashion designer from Makaha, Oahu. She has honed her love for the environment and created a brand inspired by the land and sea. Ānuenue enjoys surfing, exploring all forms of art, and a current freshman at Parsons School of Design. Her goal is to create sustainable fashion and embodies Hawaiian culture. Her first collection, Makahawhirs, debuted December 2015 when she launched her swimwear company, Anu Hawaii. She launched, the highlights of her career have been showing at Art After Dark alongside her mentor Kimi Zamora and being invited to attend New York Fashion Week in past Septembers, as well as being showcased at the Iolani Palace Fashion Show and presenting for her first time at 2019 Mamo Fashion Show. In 2017, Kia Ānuenue presented the Small Business of the Year Award by CNHA for the Council of Native Hawaiian Advancement. Next up is Koʻiahi Pūnua. She's from Kaneohe and is the 5th generation to be living on her ohana aina in Kaneohe. She's 15 years old and is currently a sophomore at Kamehameha Schools, Kapu Aloha, as well as, and as a kamali'i, she went to Punana Leo Kauai Ha'o, as well as Kekula o Sameo Manai Kalani Kamakau. Koʻiahi grew up in a home where poi was the main staple and became skilled in the art of ku'iai, learning from her makua. She was also raised in the ocean alongside her mother, Kia Ānuenue Pūnua, who was an educator of Pai Pai o Heia. Koʻiahi continues to grow her sea legs on voyaging canoes, as well as kanemoku and makali'i. When graduating high school, Koʻiahi would like to become a botanist and help to repopulate our Native Hawaiian mea kanu. She's an avid surfer, diver, lane maker, and aloha aina, and continues to honor her kūpuna by keeping their legacies alive. Lastly, Waiʻaleʻale Sarsona was born and raised in Waimanalo, Ko'olapoko. While Waimanalo is her onehanau, her ancestral roots tie her back to Keaukaha, Hawaii Island, and Hanalei, Kauai. Li'i is a proud graduate of Kekula Samuel Manaiakalei Kamakau, LPCS class of 2019. She also graduated from Windward Community College with her associates in Hawaiian Studies and Liberal Arts the same year she graduated high school. Li'i is currently a Hawaiian Studies major at University of Hawaii at Manoa in high school. She privileged to represent the voice of her generation on numerous occasions. It's for that reason she has committed her time to empowering Opio to use their voice as well as uplifting voices in spaces where Opio often go unheard. She now serves as the po'o for Aha Opio under Aha Ohana, giving back to the Hawaiian-focused charter school community that raised her. He is also working as the community outreach manager for Manamaui. That was a lot. But aloha kākou, mahalo nui for joining, and maybe we can start off with you, Li'i, answering the first panel question. What is ʻŌiwi leadership and what does it mean to you?
I think that's definitely the big question that will be answered throughout this entire panel. But I think growing up in the Hawaiian Charter School, going to school in Olelo, Hawaii at Kamakau, my kuana ike Hawaii and like the kuana ike that you learn from being raised in Olelo, Hawaii and being surrounded and immersed in ike Hawaii and ike kupuna is really a huge part of ʻŌiwi leadership. And it's the way that you carry yourself, the way that you face challenges, the way that you make decisions, the way that you interact with others, that is the way that you hold yourself as a leader, staying true to Hawaiian values such as aloha and kuleana and just acting in the ways that maybe we hope can reflect the way that our kūpuna held themselves.
Next.
I think ʻŌiwi leadership is just having a deep understanding with a connection with other ʻŌiwi to the aina, but especially yourself, because you need to know who you are as a leader and who you want to be in the future to move on. Because also I feel like every leader needs people to follow them, And so if you are not pa'a in yourself to know who you are, then not many people are going to want to be with you along that journey.
Next.
Yeah, I definitely think into both what Koʻiahi and Li'i said. It's really important as a Navy leader to know who you are and where you come from, and just pa'a the values that our kūpuna handed down to us, you know, from Olalona Eau to the way that you spend your time at the ocean or interact with different people, respecting our kupuna and just keeping those values in mind as a leader. I think definitely is what differentiates maybe any other leader from an OEV leader, because we understand, you know, that our kupuna were very successful in the way that they lived and they thrived because of values, and so just really perpetuating those.
Oh, wonderful, Mana'o. The next question we have for you guys is, have you faced any specific problems or obstacles in your ʻiwi leadership? Maybe Koʻiahi, you can start us off.
I think one of the biggest problems that I've had to face with being an OEV leader is one, I'm only 15. So although I do have a lot of experience around these things, there's still lots of things that I'm learning, and I feel like not many people want to listen to like a 15-year-old girl because they don't really think like she knows what she's talking about. So for me, like, because of how young I am, that's definitely one of the biggest challenges I've had to face, and it's still definitely something that I have to grow in.
Point. This session is promoted, you know, as a ʻiwi leadership panel, and as you can see, all of our panelists are OPO. So, for those of you tuning in, if there's, you know, if you're surprised to see OPO on this panelist, you know, maybe ask yourself why. Ānuenue, do you wanna give some mana'o?
I think talking more about being an appeal OEV leader is really important. Times we are overlooked because of our age, or because maybe we don't know as much as older leaders might. But I think that, you know, some of the setbacks we face other than age are setbacks that have to do with the way that people think about culture and the way that we think about our culture specifically, because a lot of times, you know, like in our government, they say that culture is something of the past, and that our culture was created throughout history, and then now it is just what it is. Our culture is always growing and changing as we grow and change. And so something that I think has been hard for me as an OEV leader is to kind of share that idea that culture is constantly changing and our culture is growing. But yeah.
Mahalo. I kako'o what both Koʻiahi and Ānuenue have shared. I've definitely had those experiences in my life that makua aren't always willing to hear what we have to say, and some even go as far as telling us what to say and calling it OPO voice. So that's definitely something that I have a challenge that I have faced, but the way that that gets better is that there are the few makua out there that see the value in what we have to share, and and understand that we can have these mana'o and we can give value to the decisions that need to be made. The other challenge that I have faced, kind of going with what Ānuenue was saying, is you have this kuana ike Hawaii and you have a different understanding of the world, but then how do you translate it into this contemporary time that we live in? It's really hard when you're trying to be that like one person that's trying to start something new, you know, or coming into a space that is mostly of a different thinking and trying to be kupa'a in your ano Hawaii and your kuana ike Hawaii. Yeah, I think those are the two main challenges that probably all of our OPO face.
How do you balance honoring your ʻiwi leaders that we have lived with in the community for generations, you know, like makua, kūpuna? How do you balance honoring them as well as trying to develop your own voice as an ʻiwi leader?
One important olanoʻea that comes to mind is ikawama mua kawama hope. I think it's definitely of kuana ike Hawaii for all of us to understand that our kupuna have laid out a path for us. Our own kupuna have laid out a path for us, and it is on us to follow the path of our kupuna and not anybody else's kupuna. So I think at some levels there is an understanding between generations of the value of each other, at least as Hawaiians and as that kuana ike and as that kind of values that our opio and our new generations are going to come up as the future makua. But I think yeah, our kupuna are really the kahua of our lahui, and us as OPO are there to build up, but also yeah, ike kahua mamua mahope ke kukulu. So without a solid foundation, without a solid pilina to our kupuna, without ho'omanaing our kupuna, we cannot continue to kukulu.
The next question we have for you guys is, what are some ways that makua can kāko'o their keiki in becoming ʻiwi leaders? Maybe Ānuenue, you want to start us off?
So I feel like this is such a loaded question. Honestly, I want to hear what Koʻiahi and Waiʻaleʻale have to add. I mean, li'i. But I think personally, I would say building room for like shared mana'o and making safe space where you can kāna ike and just talk about different things. I think that's one of the things that has helped me grow as an ʻiwi, being able to share my ideas with and really talk about it and just say things out loud. It really allows you to like actually digest what you're thinking and what you're wanting to share. And so having that safe space is really important for kind of incubating that ʻiwi leader. And I'd also say like going out and experiencing being with other ʻiwi leaders is super important as well. And so one thing you can do as a makua is, you know, introduce your keiki to ʻiwi leaders that you know, or just share videos maybe that you might have of them, but to kind of watch other ʻiwi leaders and the way that they, you know, speak and the way that they lead it's really empowering, and it really gives you that kahua that Li'i was talking about, you know, because we do have our kahua from our own ancestors, but there's definitely things we can take away from other ʻiwi leaders in our lahui. So I think just those two things are really important.
I'm not sure.
I think, yeah, I mean, I kāko'o what Ānuenue had mentioned about makua introducing their keiki to ʻiwi leaders. I think that's definitely how I started. We had a mix-up earlier with the login for me getting in here because they had added my mom as a panelist instead of me, who has the same name. So if you think my name is familiar, that's probably why. But it was her that had introduced me. I just so happened to be at the same place with her to this meeting of like a bunch of ʻŌiwi leaders, some of like the my biggest role models ever, just all in one room. And that was like such a huge experience for me, one of my first experiences, first life-changing experiences, because I wasn't even supposed to like participate in what they were talking about. I was just like sitting on the side. But then they all like pressured me into like sharing my manawa about it. And that was one of the first times that I felt like my leo as an opio was important, even though I was just like hanging out against the wall to like listen in to what they're talking about. It was that really, that was like my first experience of I want to be just like these people in this room. So yeah, just makua, if you recognize that kind of trait in your keiki, just kako'a them through that.
Yeah, that's what we call voluntold, Lee. You don't have a choice.
Oh, yeah. Kako'o what Ānuenue and Li'i said. Like for my parents, they took me to all these rallies, and we do ku'i at the Capitol, and we have to sleep over at the Capitol and do all these things. And before, I used to think like, oh my gosh, why are we doing this, Mom? Like, I just want to go home. But now, as I've gotten older, I realized that all the things that they did are really helped me to figure out who I want to be as a leader. And even like what Ānuenue said, just having that safe space to just bring your ideas out, because I think a lot to myself. And then when I finally say it out loud, my makua are really the one who helped me to bring those ideas to life. And so I feel like all the things that they've done to help me are just going to keep helping me in the future, because I know one day that I'm going to be a future makua and a future kūpuna. All of us are going to be. So all the things that our makua and kūpuna are teaching us now are the things that we are also going to be teaching to our future keiki and mo'opuna as well. Yeah.
Next question we have is maybe Ānuenue, you can start us off. Who exemplifies ʻŌiwi leadership, and who is your ʻŌiwi leader inspiration?
So many, but I would say my favorite kūpuna, my great grandma, whom I was named after, Frenchie DeSoto. And just having her ku'e, like totally standoffish, just powerhouse, mana wahine attitude, as something that I get to carry on is something that I find really empowering, because I know that I'm not the first, and I have this kahua that she built as a leader. And, she did a lot of work to help our people. And I think that that was something that I really hold dear, because she was able to, empower our people through through creating all the different laws that help to empower people through giving them access to different things. And she inspires me every day to always think of my lahui first. And in everything I do, it ways to perpetuate, who I am and who we are as a Kānaka in my work and in my art. And having her values set in me are something that I find really important in being an ʻŌiwi leader. But yeah, Frenchie DeSoto, that's my all-star favorite ʻŌiwi leader.
You can share next.
Oh, you go.
I think for me, my favorite is definitely my mom, Ānuenue Pūnua. She's literally right in the next room, so. But I think what I really admire about her is, like what I said, she's just super pa'a in herself. And just, I love watching her just be who she is, because it's so like awesome to see your makua grow. Because they watch you grow, but when you watch them grow, it's like so much more awesome. So, yeah.
Yeah, you're gonna make me cry. I think for besides my mom, who I have talked about already, someone that I really mahalo is Keola Chan. I am a student under him with Kapu Aloha learning Hawaiian healing practices. But before that, I had met him as a ʻŌiwi leader. So in that capacity, he is a mentor to me in that way. But like was mentioned earlier in my bio, I'm the po'o for Aho'opio with Aha Ohana, which is a coalition with Ahakane and Ahavahine. So if it wasn't for Keola recognizing the importance of Opio Leo, there would be no Aha Opio, and there would be no seat for Opio at the table when talking about Mauliola of Opio. So for him, I greatly mahalo him for recognizing in me the voice and allowing me to sit at the table to let it be heard with other makua.
You know, how do current ʻŌiwi leaders, or even you folks, how do you prepare anyone to take on kuleana of leadership? Or how have you felt that you've been able to, that you've been taught to prepare to take on kuleana? Whoever wants to start us off.
I think I remember this question, but so I'll give the other two a moment to think about it, even though I need to think about this myself. This is something that even something that I know that makua talk about or try and like figure out is how do we kako'o each other in leadership. So like on an OPO level, it's just a whole nother thing. But I think growing up as or like with the Kuana Ike Hawaii, you have a heavy sense of kuleana, and that can be a great thing, and that can be a extremely strong driving force, but it can also be kind of kamaha sometimes. So I think that ways to prepare ourselves and to prepare those around us, to kako'o those around us in leadership is giving space for ourselves and for those around us to say no sometimes, and to just like kako'o in any way that we can, and understand that you don't have to do everything, and you don't have to. There are tons of other people in this lahui that can awamo this kuleana if you can't do it alone. So whether you're a makua kako'oing or mentoring a opio in that way, or if you're just a group of friends that just want to kako'o each other in awamo ana this heavy kuleana, I think that's how we kako'o each other as ʻŌiwi leaders.
Answer next. I don't know how to follow that because I think Lee did a really good job of kind of explaining. I think the one thing that I would add is teaching flexibility, like muscle that you can grow, but it's something that's kind of hard to learn, especially I feel like in our generation we're also like pa'a and we're like, this is what I believe, and this is what it's. And a lot of times we have kūpuna that are like that too, and they're like, no, this is the way you do it, or even makua. And so sometimes it's hard to kind of be flexible, but it's like when you're getting pounded when you're surfing, if you're not flexible, you're gonna get hurt, and so you have to just go with the wave. And so just sharing, you know, ways to be flexible and how to kind of learn that muscle with your OPO or with your keiki. I feel like that's a really important part of learning how to be a leader in general, but especially an OEV leader.
I kāko'o what both Ānuenue and Waiʻaleʻale said. What I really liked about what Li'i said also was that you don't have to do everything by yourself. And I also think, I don't know if I mentioned this before, but what comes with being a leader is also having those maka'ainana who help you. Because like without those maka'ainana, you would not be a leader. And so I think that as an OEV leader, like it's also your kuleana to make sure that other people know their kuleana, because you can't do everything, and there are going to be those people like who are your right hand who are going to be like, okay, this is what she told me, now I need you to do all of this. But I think that just creating a leader, it's really hard, but once you grow into it, you will get it. And I think that some people are just like born to be leaders. Like I think Anu and Li'i, you guys are like so awesome. Yeah, so yeah, that's what I have to say.
Part of being a good leader is knowing how to follow as well. So knowing when your kuleana, you know, what is your kuleana also, and knowing what not your kuleana and what's not your kuleana is also important. I think the next question we have is, what experiences in your lives have brought you to where you are now, that in this realm of like leadership?
I think there hasn't been like one string of where my leadership, or where I've been able to show leadership. I've kind of been like all over the place in like the nonprofit realm, and as a haumana kula ho'amana, and as well as a community member. But I think that one of my biggest experiences, at least recently, that has definitely shaped me was Punana Niho in Waimanalo. So back in 2019, Waimanalo was fighting for ʻiwi kūpuna in Hunana Niho, which is Sherwood's Forest, because the city wanted to build a giant park with lots of soccer fields and camping grounds and baseball fields for the community of Waimanalo, because everybody in Waimanalo plays soccer. But that was such a learning experience for me, and it kind of goes with what I had just shared about being able to take on the kuleana of leadership. So that was like September of 2019. That was when I had first started at UH Manoa. That's when I got a job for the first time. So that was kind of like a very tumultuous time in my life. So having that added kuleana of leadership, and I would go to school. I would work like early in the morning at, I was working at Vai at the time. I would go to class midday and then come home like 3-4 o'clock, head home on the bus. And instead of going home, I would get off the bus at Sherwood's and hang out a little bit, try and relieve whoever was there and let them run home, take a shower or whatever. And I spent like every weekend there, setting up the university classes that we had done there. And this was all happening same time as the Mauna. So just collectively as a Lahui, we were all going through lots of aloha aina. We had the windmills out in Kahuku too at the same time. But that was definitely a learning experience for me, was taking on so much kuleana all at one time, and trying to figure out how to balance everything and to allow myself to make time to like just lay in bed and watch Netflix, because I knew that I was kind of running on very low for a long time. So one of my biggest advice for anybody in leadership is to just be able to take a break and recognize when you need a break too.
I can share next. I think the same thing that Lee said. It's not like very specific moment in time, but it's more just these little experiences that we have over time that kind of build that muscle, that leadership muscle. And I think mine started the day that I was born, because I was one of the older siblings in my ohana, and so I always carried that kind of kuleana of taking care of everyone, and still working on it. We're still figuring out how to be siblings and all get along, and I'm still figuring out how to be a leader in our ohana. But I think that's where it really started, because I was able to, help my younger siblings figure out like life. And so I was immediately put in this place of leadership where I was just by circumstance, leading people in a very like simple and easy way, because I wasn't the makua, obviously, but I think that really sparked my interest too, as to wanting to be a leader, because I being a leader. And so that led me to take leadership positions at school and to join different AHA. But yeah, it's definitely those little moments that you don't even realize it's happening too until you look back later and you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that was such an important moment in my life, and it really shaped who I am. But yeah, same idea.
Ānuenue, you took mine. No, I'm just kidding. No, yeah, same as Kiana. I'm the oldest of 6 kids, and like I'm 15, so all of my siblings are younger, but even I'm still young. But just kind of finding that leadership within my ohana has been like a really big thing for me, and I'm still trying to teach them, because like I'm gonna graduate in a couple years, and I know that they're still gonna need some help. So like right now, my biggest thing is like teaching my 2 younger sisters to just be able to take care of everybody when I'm not there, and just kind of like finding that leadership in my ohana helped me gain more confidence to do more other leadership type of things in our community.
Off of what Koʻiahi and Ānuenue said, there's active leadership and there's, leading by example, and you don't even know like when these moments are happening that you could be inspiring others to do the same. So if you have, I think that's our next question. Do you folks have any mana'o or any forms of advice for fellow PO or even for already established leaders in terms of finding their voice as ʻŌiwi leaderships?
I think I feel like our generation has a very strong voice, and it's just a matter of being true to it and voicing it. It can be hard, like we had mentioned before, with navigating with makua and kūpuna, and even between our own generation sometimes. But yeah, I think my biggest advice is just don't be afraid to have different opinions, and don't be afraid to voice your opinions, because without voicing them, or our voices have value as the future kūpuna and as the future makua and as the ones that are going to be making the decisions. and a lot of the decisions that are being made now by Makua and Kūpuna are ones that are gonna more affect us than it will them in their lifetime. So yeah, just don't be afraid and just be true to your own leo.
I totally agree with Li'i. I think just don't be afraid to just share your mana'o. And I feel like, especially for Opio, one of the hardest things for us is we don't have form for us to really give our mana'o. So I think the best thing is really to just create a platform for yourself so that you can be heard. And I think that one of the easiest ways to do that is social media. You know, you can create an Instagram account where you can try to get your voice across all at one time to all of these different people. And I think our generation, we really have a lot to say, and we all have all these different opinions. So we're definitely going to agree and disagree on some things, but that's just a part of being a leader and being together as well.
I think both of you have really strong mana'o, and that my advice for Opio, Koʻiahi, you're living it, too young to be a leader or to do whatever your i'ini is, and so like that's something that I experienced when I was younger, a long time ago when I was in middle school. I had certain people telling me that I was too young to have the kuleana that I had with my business, and I wasn't ready to take on that leadership role. And I think that just it just lit the fire inside of me. I was like, now I want to do it that much more, you know? But just knowing that it's not necessarily about having the kuleana at that age, but it's about having the desire and the i'ini to do it. And that it, you know, it is kuleana, but it's a gift. It's not kuleana so much as a burden, as people might say kuleana is. But I think just knowing that even in your youth, you don't need to wait until you're older to take on these leadership roles. And so if you are wanting to, but you're not sure because you're an LPO, do it. Like, just do whatever it is you want to do. Take that leadership role, and just like, you think you're too old. Like, nobody's too old for anything, you know, like you can do it too. It's not letting age define you. It's definitely something I think is important that we need to share with. Yeah.
You know, younger OPO leaders. Are there any other like ʻŌiwi, OPO that you can think of within the community that are developing their voices that aren't here, that you want to give your leo pai pai to?
Us on the spot with this one.
I think something that at least maybe not individual people, but groups of Opio that I'd like to recognize are definitely our Kulaho'a Mana alumni. There's a lot of us that are doing great things, whether we're only there for whether we transferred to other schools after or graduated from Kulaho'a Mana, our Hawaiian focused charter schools, and our Kulakaya Olelo, our immersions. There's a lot of us that have quickly moved into positions in the community, and it's so great to see where everybody is and the levels that everybody is at after, like, so quickly after graduating from these different kinds of kula and being given the kind of education and the kind of kahua that we were given at these kinds of kula. But that's one group of Opio. Another group, there is a huge group of young Kānaka business owners, including Ānuenue, including myself, and Koʻiahi, actually. And Kamale. So, like, not only should you be supporting local, but you can go beyond that and support your local Opio. I can think of a good amount of, and there's so many businesses too that are run by OPIO that highlight Kānaka values, but then also highlight Ōlelo Hawaiʻi and work to promote Ōlelo Hawaiʻi in their products and just all kinds of Hawaiian values. So those are the groups.
Yeah, those are really great groups. Not to play favorites, but one, Opio OEV leader, another one that I kind of wanted to talk about is my little sister Pua. And she had her own business for a little while, but she doesn't anymore. But she's actually been, she doesn't really know it yet, but she has been carrying this kuleana of bringing he'enalu into the mainstream in Hawaii. And sharing that it is in fact Ike Hawaii and that he'enalu is part of our culture. And so she has been just surfing. She just had a contest today, actually. She's doing her first pro contest lately. She has been awarded different things for just surfing. But I think that one of the things she really strives to do is share that surfing is Hawaii too, and that surfing is just as much a part of our culture as Ōlelo Hawaiʻi and Hoiva'a and all those other things that we practice. And so I think that are not leading necessarily in a leader, like in a leader way, but that are taking small roles that are building our community and kind of growing our Ike. And
I love what both of you said, and I really loved about how Waiʻaleʻale talked about kula ho'amana and how they are a big thing for OEV leadership. I feel that like kula ho'amana and kula kaiapuni are really the start of leadership for many keiki because there are super small schools, and so in order for your voice to be heard, you have to be very loud and you have to go out and just share your mana'o because a lot of the schools maybe have like 150 kids max at a kula. And so for them to really be heard, they just have to get their mana'o across. And I think there are a lot of great leaders who have come from many kula kaiapuni. And I think that the best part about it is they're doing a lot of it through Ōlelo Hawaiʻi and through Ike Hawaiʻi.
How has Ōlelo Hawaiʻi affected your life as well as your leadership aspects and roles? Maybe Li'i, you can start us off.
I think Ōlelo Hawaiʻi, it's not the only way to learn or to develop a Hawaiian kuana ike, but it's definitely a huge part of it. But Ōlelo Hawaiʻi is like a huge kahua, and it's a new doorway to understanding the way that our kūpuna thought and the way that our kūpuna lived. I can think of one time in Papamala'o when I was in kindergarten, we were like going around like, oh, you're so momona, like thinking kuana ike haole, like thinking that we're calling each other fat, but like later on growing up and learning that momona is not like fat in the way that our kupuna thought, but like vai and like abundant. So that's just one way that Ōlelo Hawaiʻi is like a whole other window into our kuana ike Hawaii. But I think Ōlelo Hawaiʻi should play a bigger role in the way that we operate as people and as Kānaka. There's so much value in Ōlelo Hawaiʻi beyond just, well, not beyond just knowing our language, but it's really the kahua of our ano as Hawaii, and we can learn so much from it.
Can you see the question one more time. When you asked, it was a little breaking up. Kalamai.
And also your leadership aspects and roles.
I think one of my favorite things about Olelo Hawaii is just the kauna. Because like Li'i said, you know, momona, some people think it means fat, but to our kūpuna, it really just meant abundant. And so for me, Olelo Hawaii, it really just changes my perspective on everything. So last year, I was a freshman, and in my biology class, we had to do a science project. And our kumu asked, like, what is science? And everybody was like, oh, it's microbes and bacteria and all these things. And all I really wanted to say was kumulipo. And I didn't say it because I felt like my kumu wouldn't understand what I was talking about. So I just went with the simple things. But after, I was like, oh, I should have said it, because it would have started up a great conversation about how science is tied into all these different things. Olelo Hawaii is pretty much everything. If you think of it, like, you can tie Olelo Hawaii into everything, and there's really so much mana in our Olelo. And I'm still figuring that out too, that just he mana ko ka Olelo, and everything that you say can come to life.
Oh my gosh, how to follow. I think knowing Olelo and coming to like we now have has definitely made it easier to be an OEV leader, because it gives you that kahua, and it gives you some other OEV. And I think that, just like the girls said, you know, we need to do so much more to share Olelo Hawaii and to perpetuate it. Even as Li'i said, more than just knowing the language is one thing, but if you never speak it, if you never give it life, then there's no knowing it in the first place, right? And so, like, even in our ohana, we all speak Hawaiian, and my dad never learned, but he picked up. And I think that's like the beauty of it, is that just giving it life, just practicing it, is like you're already giving it more value and growing how big it is. And if you think about how many people speak Olelo Hawaii, there aren't that many larger languages. And that's something that I really realized here in New York, where I am right now and going to school, is that people, they know nothing about our culture and our Olelo. And so when they hear it, they're like, what language is that? Like, that sounds so foreign. It's so strange to see people who aren't OEV, who don't know. And so just sharing that here is something that I found really valuable, and sharing, you know, little pieces whenever I get the chance of like our culture and history and who we are as a people. But I think that our Olelo is the strongest way that we can share who we are.
Had that Li'i will probably be new to you as well, but what are some ways that Olelo influences OEV leadership and differentiates it from, you know, the Western kind of thinking of leadership? I can let you stay on that one for a little bit.
I think that OEV leadership takes on such a deeper kuleana than what Western leadership might look like. I think I had seen somebody's message in the chat talking about how some people think that that leadership is power, but as an OEV leader, we think that leadership is about stewardship and kuleana. So I think that Olelo Hawaii and just like Kuanaʻike Hawaii in general plays a strong part in the way that we understand our kuleana of leadership. and the way that we understand our pilina around us. Whenever I like talk about kuleana and pilina, I talk about these circles, and I never remember who originated it, but I know that Dr. Jamaica Osorio uses it in her classes as well. But so at the center of the circle is yourself, and then the next circle out is your ohana, and then the next circle out is your kaiaulu, and then the next circle out is your lahui. So basically the lesson from that on pilina is that like without the pilina to yourself, there's no pilina to your ohana. Without pilina to your ohana, there's no pilina to your kaiaulu. And without your kaiaulu, there's no pilina to your lahui. Just being pa'a and setting your kahua in those different aspects before building out. But that's something that we understand through Olalo Hawaii and through our Kuana Ike Hawaii, with our mo'olalo and our olalo no'eo, and even just like words like pilina and kuleana.
Personally, I'd say the biggest difference that I see in ʻŌiwi leadership and Western leadership is that we aloha aina. And we know that our aina is our kua'ana and that it has value and that we need it to survive. And I think that's something that's so lacking in the Western Hemisphere, is that our aina is important and we forget sometimes to honor that and to show that through the ways that we act and the ways that we lead and the decisions that we make. And so I think that's something really powerful that we have as ʻŌiwi, is that we already know aloha aina is important. And that's something that I think as right now is something that we should be leading in the world. And so like we have climate change that's happening, as we speak, and there's tons of countries around the world that are doing so much for it. And I think that, as a state, we have so much room to grow and so much to bring to the table as ʻŌiwi. Just bringing that through into our forms of Western leadership would be something really valuable for us. But I think that having that aloha aina as a kahua is really empowering and really just powerful.
Oh my gosh, you guys have such great mana'o. No, yeah, I really just love how, like, I really think that leadership is a kuleana, and it's a great privilege to have, and for some people it can be easily taken away. And I think that definitely Western ideas, right? Western, they just really want the power and the kulana, that status. But for us, we would do anything to show people how good a leader can be. And I think it really just comes with humbleness and knowing that we are all equal. And no matter how many things you do and how many things you want to do, we're all one people together.
Is there any like negative kind of instances in when you felt like you weren't supported by people in your community, or what are some ways that some things that you wish that you had or that were lacking when you were developing your voice as being a ʻŌiwi leader, or some things that the support that you wish you had, or maybe you did already have all of the support that you needed?
So if you guys didn't know, I'm a Kamehameha Schools alum. That's so weird to say. But I just graduated this past May, and I think that one of the things that I felt was really restricting was the way that our school believes in tradition. And not Hawaiian tradition and our lahui, but tradition like wearing uniforms and going to chapel every month and wearing dress whites, which I would never wear to any other occasion. But I think, just being in these confining spaces is really hard to grow, and it's really hard to, nobody wants to listen. And so I think that like for students that go there, like Koʻiahi, or for even students that don't, having that space at home to really be pa'a in your Ike Hawaii, your ʻŌiwi leadership, and just having that connection to the aina and to your people and your culture. Because when you are in places like that, it's hard to breathe. Because I remember trying to change things, and to like, they won't even teach about Hawaiian gods, like, and they're not even gods like gods are, anyways. Whole nother thing. But just the way that it was so restricting, it's hard to have your voice and keep going after a certain point, because you're like, well, nobody's listening and nobody wants to listen. And so I think it's so important to have that space at home. And I think that that's something that our older ʻŌiwi leaders need to work on, is creating those spaces and kind of just being a little more open to hearing what we have to say. Yeah.
Totally agree with you. For me, one of the biggest things that I have with going to Kamehameha is we have all these like who am I projects, or what makes me Hawaiian. And something that like really, really surprised me is so many people say that they're Hawaiian because they go to Kamehameha, not realizing that it's like the other way around. That they go to Kamehameha, or like they're Hawaii, that's why they go to Kamehameha. Like they're what makes the school Hawaiian. And so like that was a really big thing for me. And also like what Anu talked about like about how they don't teach about like gods and Hawaiian gods. So last year I was in a Ekalesia class, and they asked like, oh, who are your gods? Who do you look up to in that like religious world? And so I talked about my akua Hawaii, and like one of my kumus totally just like shut me down, and I was like, oh my gosh, like totally just like, and it was on Zoom, right? So I'm like talking, and then she just like totally muted me, and so I was like, and so for me that was a really big thing. And so this year, like, I'm a lot more quiet. I kind of just go around, but I really try to do my best to get my voice across. But yeah, it's a big thing.
I think there's a lot of like systematically that basically the systems aren't ready for the Kuana Ike that we have, and that can be such a challenge sometimes, like just with trying to navigate a like contemporary world in Kuana Ike Hawaii. Like there's so much there's ways that we want to do things that feel right to us as Hawaiians, but it's just like, oh, that's not how you're supposed to do it, or that's not the way that the system works. Just like the kinds of education that is offered to our keiki. But I think obviously systematic change is not going to happen like probably in our time as OPO, but that's hopefully something that we can accomplish in our lifetimes, is trying to set it up as best as possible for our future OPO and future Makua. But one of the key things that I think like one of the times that I felt not supported possibly by in the role of leadership is I was once invited to like give my voice and be like the OPO voice. And then when I got there, they handed me a piece of paper and they're like, oh, this is what you're gonna say. And I was like, all right. But I ended up trying to like make it work as best as possible and still kind of have that OPO voice. So I ended up like doing it in ʻŌiwi Hawaii instead, and that was like the closest that I could get. But it was times like that, and like that situation in specifically that a lot of the people around me were like basically like, oh, screw what they're saying, like you should have just done what you're gonna do originally. But I think I haven't had that experience again, and I don't think I would let that happen to myself again. And I really hope that there aren't any other OPO that are going through that same thing. But there is a lot of work systematically that needs to happen to open up spaces for OPO.
Influenced you folks to grow? How do you feel like your roles in leadership have allowed you to grow?
I think that I learned a lot throughout my time, and it's definitely helped me learn about myself and learn how to hold myself and how to carry myself, how to put boundaries. But I think being a leader in any kind of way is a lot of putting yourself out there and a lot of opening yourself up to other people, and not always in a good way. Like, you can definitely be open to a lot of critique in putting yourself out there. So I think that's the main way that I have learned about myself.
You can go.
Okay. Just kind of building off of what Li'i said, being an appeal leader, especially, you get a lot of criticism and you have a lot of people telling you how to do it and what you shouldn't be doing. And so I think it has helped me learn who I am and become pa'a in my values and know what, I want to be sharing and what I want to be perpetuating. And so it really helps build who you are. And it's not always in the nicest or, best way. Sometimes people are harsh. And it sucks to hear some things, but they really do kind of turn into that fire that just lights you up and makes you want to do it even more, And so, yeah, just really finding who you are has been something that I've gotten from taking those.
I think it's definitely like my confidence. So if you've like, when I meet people for the first time, I'm like really shy, don't really talk. But once I get to know you more, I can just keep talking all day. And so I think for me, definitely taking leadership roles has helped me to gain my confidence. And like what both of them said, like getting criticism and being critiqued is really what helps me to build up my i'ʻini to want to do more. And I feel like no matter what people do, there's always going to be the positives and the negatives, but it's all just about the learning experience and how we can grow as Kānaka ʻŌiwi.
From Halani Bard, let's see. How can we foster Kapu Aloha within our lahui as we gather together to hear about the process towards self-determination? Sounds like a little hard question. Let you guys think about that a little bit.
Actually reading that in the chat, and I think that's such a great question. And I think for me, it starts with knowing what Kapu Aloha is. And people can define Kapu Aloha in many different ways. You might have your own definition. And I think the most important thing about Kapu Aloha is it's all about respect. And it's about knowing that even if people have different opinions, you still practice Kapu Aloha, and you still, even if they have different opinions, and even if they might be wrong, or you might be wrong, you never know, right? That you're still being respectful, and you're still having this like ha carry like we're dealing with the situation. And I think that's really important for OEV leadership, because we do have so many people with different ideas of what is right and what is wrong, and what is Hawaii. And so I think fostering Kapu Aloha starts with really knowing what it is. And so as a lahui, we need to do a better job of teaching our keiki and our opio that eventually they're going to become, our OEV leaders. And so I think that would be one of the best for this, is just by teaching it to our younger generations and the older ones if needed, because I do know we do have some people who are still learning that. And I knowing if you have Kapu Aloha, then you're going to be like sharing that feeling, and it's kind of this warmth that we have inside of us, and that other people are having it too, even if you're not telling them to, but just by enacting and giving it life.
I really loved what Anu said. For me, one of my biggest Kapu Aloha role models is Liu Kalani. And at the time, I don't really think she knew that she was practicing Kapu Aloha, but I feel like, during the overthrow is a great example of Kapu Aloha. Although we lost a lot of things, I've heard a lot of people say that, like, oh, she didn't fight for her people, she just gave up her kingdom. But I think what they don't really know was that she chose to keep her people safe, because we didn't have the equipment to fight back against those Kānaka who came here. But she did what she thought was right for our Kānaka to survive to where we are today. And so I really think that she is a great example of Kapu Aloha in so many different ways.
I think for me, and how I think we need to come together is like how Ānuenue had said earlier, like everybody has a different idea of how they want things to be done. I think among our community and among like larger hui, sometimes there's a lack of like sense of kuleana to each other, and to those around us, to like be willing to come to the table and talk things out, or like find some way to holomua. I think there's many people in all different levels that have a very staunch idea of what they think needs to happen, and are willing to do anything anything to get it done the way that they want it to be done. So I mean, there's no easy way to address that, to get this conversation going and like this value in our community, like probably even in our lifetime. But it's really with just education of our own values into the next generations, and hopefully my keiki and our keiki can be the ones that are makoko to a more that kuleana of coming together and having these kinds of discussions and making these decisions.
The end of our discussion, our panel session. If anyone else has any questions for our panelists and they'd like to drop it in the chat or in the Q&A feature, feel free. Leave a little bit more time. As we wait for other questions to roll in, possibly, I just wanted to mahalo all three of you for joining in on this conversation and allowing me to be here as well. It's really been a privilege to get to hear your folks' mana'o and just to join in on the conversation. Mahalo.
For being our moderator. Oh my gosh, I'm so happy that we get to have you with us too, and to just be with us too. We're super lucky to have you.
Kamale, what do you think OPO leadership is? Or what do you think OEV leadership is?
I mean, I feel like you guys have all touched it. We've been talking about it for a little over an hour, but you know, I think differentiating between this kind of toxic form of leadership that's, you know, viewed in the Western realm, you know, like you are the leader and you have your followers, and it's just like more of a dictatorship. I feel like the way that some people view leadership, not even just like in a legal sense of dictatorship, but just being unable to listen and to take criticism and to hear people's mana'o in terms of how certain systems can run better. I feel like having ʻiwi leadership and having like these solid roots and a kahua to draw from, you know, I feel like that's what really differentiates ʻiwi leadership from a Western form of leadership. But yeah, that's my mana'o. But you know, completely influenced by just the ʻiwi leaders that we already have, as well as, you know, our new Opio leaders that are up and coming. So mahalo nui. I don't see any other questions popping up in the chat, but do any of you have any closing remarks? Mana'o.
Mahalo nui a ʻoukou pākahi a pau for joining us today and allowing us a space. Mahalo nui to Auntie Mehana and CNHA for giving us the time to share our mana'o here. We hope that you learned something and are able to take something away from us sharing. But yeah, mahalo nui.
Mahalo for coming. This is my first ever panel, and I was really nervous, but just being here with all of you guys, it really made a difference. So mahalo nui to everybody.
Mahalo for having us. It was super nice to talk with these mana wahine. So awesome to hear you share Koʻiahi and to see other Opio that are taking leadership roles. And all of the ike that Li'i shared was so empowering as well, and Kamale. I mean, you guys are all amazing. Mahalo for letting me be here and talk on this panel and spit my mana. But yeah, aloha.
Our session is coming to a close, and you know, in this hop-in platform, I believe you can return to the stage and then wait for our next session to start. Yeah. I know that there's some other awesome conversations happening after this. So mahalo nui. Aloha. the panelists want to return to the stage as well, you can do that. Okay, mahalo.
Girls, already go hang.